Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, an HOA repeatedly called the police on me because supposedly my farm is illegal. I am not even part of this HOA. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a story from r/am I the jerk, and it is titled, "Am I the jerk for getting an HOA compliance officer fired after he harassed us about Christmas lights while my mother-in-law was dying?" My mother-in-law, Marigold, was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer last winter. She had always been more of a mom to me than my own mother, who passed when I was young. Marigold was the kind of person who would show up at your door with a homemade casserole because she thought you might be having a rough day. She helped us paint our entire house when we first moved in, insisted on hosting weekly family dinners, and was over the moon when our daughter Amanda was born last year. The diagnosis hit us all hard. My wife Emily was devastated. They had always been incredibly close. Between hospital visits, taking care of our 11-month-old, and trying to keep our jobs, we were barely keeping it together. The holidays were approaching, and normally we go all out with decorations. It is a whole family tradition where Marigold would come over and help us put everything up while blasting Christmas music and drinking her famous homemade hot chocolate. Well, this year we managed to get the lights up with help from my brother-in-law Ash. But well, taking them down, it just was not a priority. Every day was a blur of hospital visits, trying to keep Amanda on some kind of schedule and catching whatever sleep we could. The lights stayed up well past Christmas and then New Year's and then mid-January, and that is when the trouble started with Josh. He was supposedly our community's HOA compliance verification specialist, a title he had apparently created himself, as we later discovered. At first, it was just occasional drive-bys in his personal vehicle, which he had decorated with magnetic signs reading, "Official HOA compliance vehicle." Then he started leaving notices on our door, unofficial ones we later discovered that he had printed himself on fancy paper with gold borders. The situation came to a head one evening in late January. I was just getting home from the hospital. Marigold had a particularly rough day with her chemo when I noticed Josh's car parked outside our house again. Our Ring doorbell had been going crazy with notifications all day, so I pulled up the footage. This guy had stopped by our house 7 times that day, each time getting out and examining our Christmas lights like they were evidence in a criminal investigation. In one clip, he was actually taking photos measuring the distance between light bulbs with a laser measure. Who does that? I called the HOA office trying to figure out what the emergency was. Their conversation went something like this. Me, "Hey, I'm calling about Josh's multiple visits to my property today." Josh, on the other end of the line, cutting me off. "Ah yes, the Christmas lights violation at XYZ Street. Christmas ended 26 days ago. Your continued display of seasonal decorations is in violation of HOA code section." I'm dealing with a family medical emergency. My mother-in-law is… Josh interrupting again. "Not my problem, sir. Rules are rules. Remove the lights within 72 hours or face fines of $25 per day for the first week, escalating to $50 per day thereafter. I've documented everything with my certified laser measurement tool." Me, "Can you show me where in the HOA bylaws it says…" Josh, "I don't have to show you anything. I'm the authority here. I've been certified by the National Association of Homeowner Association Compliance Specialists." By the way, we later found out this organization does not exist. He had made it up and created a fake certificate in Photoshop. At this point, my wife had come outside after putting Amanda down for her nap. She overheard his tone and, well, let's just say, pregnancy and dealing with her mom's cancer had given her zero tolerance for bullies. Emily stormed over to his car and said, "Who do you exactly think you are? My mother is dying of cancer. We've been spending every moment at the hospital. Do you want to come take the lights down yourself? Because unless you do, they are staying up until we have the time and energy to deal with them." Josh actually smirked and adjusted his clip-on tie. "Ma'am, your personal problems are not my concern. As a certified compliance specialist..." "Certified by whom?" Emily was practically shaking. "Show me those rules right now. Show me exactly where it says that Christmas lights have to come down by a specific date." He couldn't, of course, because no such rule existed. The next HOA board meeting was the following week. We had not planned to attend. Marigold had an important scan scheduled for that morning, but the scan had to be rescheduled due to equipment issues, so we decided to go and formally complain about the harassment we had been facing. What we discovered was shocking. Josh had been running quite a little empire of fake violations. He was not even officially employed by the HOA. He was a subcontractor through a company called elite community standards, which turned out to be an LLC he had registered himself. He had been doing this for months, particularly targeting families he thought wouldn't have the time or energy to fight back, meaning single parents, elderly residents, and families dealing with medical issues just like us. The HOA board and general manager were horrified. One board member, Mrs. Candragon, an 80-year-old Spitfire who's lived in the community since it was built, actually stood up and said, "Young man, I've had those same Christmas lights on my palm trees year-round for the past decade. They look pretty and make me happy. Are you gonna find me too?" It gets even better though. During the meeting, other residents started speaking up too. So it turned out Josh had been pocketing money from residents who paid his fake fines in cash, which he insisted had to be paid in person to maintain a proper chain of custody of funds. He was fired on the spot, and the HOA's lawyer immediately began preparing a cease and desist letter to prevent him from continuing his scam in other communities. As for Marigold, I'm happy to say she's been cancer-free for over a year now. She still comes over every Sunday for family dinner, though now she brings Amanda her own tiny mug of hot chocolate, mostly milk with a dash of cocoa, and the Christmas lights? Well, we finally took them down in March when things had settled down a bit, but this year we are planning to leave them up until spring, just because we can. Mrs. Candragon even suggested we start a new community tradition of keeping lights up through winter to brighten the dark months. But here is why I am posting. A former neighbor recently told me that I went too far by getting Josh fired. They said he was just trying to make the community better and probably had a family to support. That maybe we should have just worked something out with him privately instead of making a scene at the HOA meeting. It is bothering me, so Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this. Do you think OP was being the a-hole here or not? And yeah guys, I would say OP definitely did the right thing and Josh got exactly what he deserved. This guy was a total douchebag. Comment number 1 on Reddit said, "Not the a-hole, you were dealing with a seriously ill family member and this man chose to harass you over Christmas lights?" Then it turns out he was running an elaborate scam. The only a-hole here is him. Sending good vibes to your mother-in-law, by the way. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. This guy was literally running a scam targeting vulnerable families. He was impersonating official HOA authority and committing fraud. You didn't go too far. If anything, you didn't go far enough. He should be in jail. And the next one is the title story, which is titled, "HOA keeps calling cops on me because my farm is illegal." As a kid, I always romanticized living out in the countryside surrounded by nature. I grew up as a city kid, but I always fantasized about a life where I could live for myself and by myself. Of course, in the modern world, this is an incredibly difficult task, but not impossible. This fantasy started when I was very young, as my grandparents owned a farm just outside the city. I would come down every few times a month to visit. I would even participate in some farm work like collecting eggs or some other small task. When my grandpa passed, my grandmother moved in with my parents and decided to transfer the farm to me. Of course, this was with my consent and I accepted the gift with great pleasure and gratitude. It could not have come at a better time. It was just at the start of the pandemic, which led me to lose my job. I was depending mostly on government aid for everything, including rent and groceries. My grandpa's death hit hard, but my grandma said that he would want me to take over the farm and would want to help me in a tough time. So in short, I took over the farm and have been living on it ever since. It's a relatively small farm. All the work I do on the farm is enough to sustain me, so I'm not really doing any of the work for profit. I take care of a small flock of chickens and a herd of goats and maintain a vegetable garden, growing all sorts of vegetables like beetroot, spinach and other greens and tomatoes. I'm trying to incorporate some fruits as well, so let's hope that goes well. My livestock and the vegetable garden have given me an easy way to make a life for myself on the farm, and also for those wondering, yes, I do have a job. I work online for a company that only requires me to make calls in and out. I know that signal is usually bad in the countryside, but like I said, I'm right next to the city, so I can work just fine. I am an introvert though, so I almost never go into the city unless I'm meeting up with someone or I have some business to attend to. All in all, I'm pretty content with the life I live and would not have it any other way. Like I said, I live pretty close to the city. It is not one of those big cities, not New York or something, and it mostly consists of suburban neighborhoods. I'm right up against one of these neighborhoods. At the edge of my property, there's a large fence that cuts off the city limits and the suburban neighborhood from everything else, including my farm. The neighborhood I'm gonna be talking about is on the other side of this fence. I like the people there, they are nice, and I'm actually friends with some of them. I talk to them from time to time and always give them some of my food if there's any to spare. Oftentimes the stuff will go bad before I can even get a chance to use it, as I'm a one-person household after all, so it's honestly a lot more beneficial for me to give it away. This community is run by the local HOA. To put it simply, the HOA does not like me. According to what I hear from my friends, the HOA board members consider my farm an eyesore in their otherwise perfect community. Apparently, it is a violation of their aesthetics clause, which is, by the way, such a dumb rule to have. They've tried forcing me to join the HOA a few times in the past, but I've always refused. The problems really started 3 months ago because their petty, unrelenting jerks, the HOA, has been calling the police on me, claiming that my farm is illegal, unsanitary, and that it attracts vermin. And well, maybe the HOA is onto something, because HOA generations could sometimes be considered as vermin in my book. Either way, just a little joke. However, every single time the police arrive, they find nothing of the sort. I pride myself on maintaining my farm and everything on it. It went on for weeks, and although I never got into any sort of legal trouble, it was insanely insufferable to deal with and exceptionally frustrating. I'm sure the police felt the exact same way. A month in, I got so tired of it that I decided to confront the HOA's president, a woman who we will call Karen. I found out that the HOA typically held meetings at the nearest local library in the city, so I decided to email Karen and have us meet there for my confrontation. Honestly, I'm surprised she said yes to my request in the first place. I came to the library with all the documents I figured I would need, including property deeds and city ordinances. I introduced myself to Karen and we remained relatively civil at the beginning. I presented to her the documents and stated that my farm was clearly separated from the neighborhood over, which the HOA has jurisdiction, adding on to the fact that I was not in the HOA in the first place. And therefore clearly none of their clauses, including the one about aesthetics, were not viable and didn't apply to me. I told her that I was not gonna join the HOA, no matter how much they tried to convince me, and I did not appreciate the HOA's constant harassment, trying my best not to sound like I was attacking her. As civil as I was, though, Karen did not care. She said that even if I was not part of the HOA, the farm still remained an eyesore. Yes, she said this to my face, and a health hazard. She said that she would give me an ultimatum: get rid of my farm or join the HOA. Obviously, these were both horrible choices. Either way, I would no doubt be subjected to HOA harassment and the organization would win. Getting rid of my farm would mean that I would have to move somewhere else, no doubt into one of the houses the HOA controls. On the other hand, if I joined the HOA, I would be subjected to their rules, and because of their aesthetics clause, I would no doubt have to alter my farm in an irreversible way. I told her that both choices were horrible and that I wouldn't be doing either. And with that, I left. This pissed Karen off, although I don't have the full story. I believe that Karen basically started getting other HOA members to harass me. One day I woke up to find a whole line of cars parked along my property line. There were so many cars that even my driveway was blocked. Luckily, I did not need to go anywhere at the time, but it was absolutely insane how she was able to convince so many people to harass me for practically no reason. It felt almost frightening, honestly, to have that many people out for you. I'm not really sure if it was all done in a malicious way. Maybe Karen told them that they could park their cars along my property, I don't know, but either way, I did not like it. I got the cars to move by calling the cops, who went around the neighborhood warning people who had parked their cars there that if they didn't move their vehicles, the police would have to take action. I also heard from my friends who live in that neighborhood that Karen was spreading lies about me and my farm, trying to paint me as a careless person who lets their farm stay a health hazard despite the fact that it could affect other people. This is when I decided to take some legal action. It was clear that Karen was not gonna give up unless I did, and I'm stubborn as hell, so I was not gonna back down. First, I installed security cameras around my property, and honestly, since I live on open land with no one around, other than the neighbors on the other side of the fence, but they wouldn't really pay attention, I should have done this a while ago. But I guess the thought never really crossed my mind before, so I installed the cameras now in order to document what the HOA was doing if they dared to do any more. I waited a few more days to get some evidence from the cameras. I did not think I would, but on the last day I saw that HOA members were posting nasty posters on my fence telling people to stay away from my farm. After that, I contacted the city council. I reported all of the things the HOA did, including the incident with the cars, which I took a picture of, and the posters, which I provided security camera and physical evidence for. While I was at the city council, I also made sure to get a permit to set up a roadside stand. You might be wondering why I did this. Although I could take legal action against the HOA's harassment, I needed to win back the community's feeling towards me in order to fight against Karen and fix my reputation. Well, luckily, I had friends on my side. They helped to promote my roadside stand by buying some of my items and sharing them with their neighbors. Although the neighbors were hesitant at first, they began to become more open-minded and accepting of my produce. Once they tried it, I basically won them over. Many of the residents from the HOA-controlled neighborhood began visiting my stand and even buying my products. Day after day, they would come back raving about my things. I'm really trying not to toot my own horn here, but it's true. Anyway, I won back the neighborhood and all I had to deal with now was the main HOA. The city council heard my case and thankfully, and unsurprisingly, they agreed to punish the HOA for their actions. They fined the HOA for the illegal parking stunt and warned them against further harassment. The council asked if I wanted to charge them for defamation as well, but I said no. That was more trouble I didn't need and I don't make enough money to afford bringing the chaos to court. Besides though, the HOA learned their lesson and I was back in good graces with the community. Speaking of which, because the community realized that my farm was not a health hazard, they actually pressured the HOA into admitting that they were wrong, which they did in a formal statement. In the statement, they apologized for their actions and admitted that the farm was not a safety hazard despite previous beliefs. They had no real reason to hate on my farm, so I guess that was the best they could come up with. It's been a month since then and all has been going well for me. The HOA no longer harasses me, of course. I think Karen was pretty upset at getting punished for her actions. Sometimes when I'm in the area, I see her glaring at me from her lawn. Other times I would see her drive past my farm and scowl. I'm a little worried about that, but I don't think Karen would do anything now that the law has already dealt with her once. The farm is still doing good and so is the roadside stand. I know I said that I don't farm for profit, and I still don't in my opinion, but whenever I have extra produce, I just put it on the roadside stand for anyone who is interested. It's actually gotten me quite a bit of extra income and I've become friends with a lot of people in the neighborhood, some of whom were even perpetrators in the whole HOA incident. Most of the people involved have apologized and I'm not one to hold grudges, so I don't really care. I'm just glad that I still have my farm and that it is now all behind me. Before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/Petty Revenge and it is titled "Father-in-law being a bully to my husband? I will hack the hell out of you." And by the way, let me know in the comments what you think about these short stories at the end of the video. I think it's a good way to end a video. But then again, I would love to hear your feedback. So my father-in-law, 74 male, is an abusive narcissist. He does not know how to handle feelings, doesn't know how to love or be loved, and he hates physical contact. When my mother-in-law and him were still married, he beat her up regularly until my husband was old enough and hooked his lights out. That's just for context, so now let's move to the present time. My sister-in-law, 52, died last Monday, and of course everyone is heartbroken. My husband has the same autoimmune disease as my SIL, and he felt really guilty that he couldn't go to the hospital as often as he wanted. Yesterday, the whole family came together just to comfort each other, including my father-in-law. My husband stayed at home because his disease had a massive flare-up. So when I came back from a smoke break, I heard my father-in-law discussing with my mother-in-law, and soon I discovered that the subject was my husband. FIL was mad because my hubby didn't give him enough attention the evening SIL died. He accused hubby of wallowing in self-pity. If there's something my husband does not do, it is that. It was sheer projection. I stood up and waltzed outside. He shouted that I did not need to leave, and my response was, that's my choice, I did not want to make a scene. Anyway, when I cooled down a bit, I went back inside and went back to sit on my place right next to FIL. He grabbed my arm and wanted to talk to me privately, and I followed. He told me he didn't want to upset me and how it was my husband's fault because he ignored him. I told him thank you for the apologies and that it was a conversation for another time. And then I hugged him tightly and long. I gave him a kiss on the cheek and went back to my conversation with my mother-in-law. The look on his face was priceless, and this hug was the most passive-aggressive thing I could think of doing. And yeah guys, this is literally killing them with kindness taken to the next level. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.